Hey, we live in interesting times. I think that we're just about, as a human race, about to crack gravity modification. And not just in harebrained theories, but actually experiments that have already demonstrated a positive effect. And there's one man who has been following all these breaking developments, and that's Tim Ventura. You know Tim from his channel, and he's a friend of mine and has been a great collaborator with me, putting me in touch with these scientists. If it wasn't for Tim, I wouldn't have ever talked to the Project Green Glow people that you've just watched and the people at Falcon Space. But Tim Ventura has done something else, something extraordinary. He knows people who have samples of possible crashed UFO material, extraterrestrial metal and exotic materials. Why that's so important and fascinating is that those exotic materials might be the key to modifying gravity. Extraterrestrials, if they have visited planet Earth, need to control space-time, both time and space, to cross the vast distances from their planet to ours. How might they do that? Well, new research is looking at the structure of the hull of their craft. This has been known for a long time. Your government and defense contractors have been looking at what's called the 5 observables. And one of those observables, which is present globally, worldwide, is symmetry. Spheres and egg-shaped craft. That might be a clue to how ET does modify gravity. But if we have a sample of a hull of an extraterrestrial UFO craft, we can copy it. And if and when we understand that, it's a giant leap for mankind, a leap where we leave Earth. So Tim Ventura and I would humbly like you to join us. We have these regular discussions, but today we talk about something extraordinary. What's the latest experimental science in producing anti-gravity effects? And by examining exotic extraterrestrial material, can we work out how UFOs work? Hey everybody, you all know who this person is. This is Tim Ventura. I have to say, Tim is the most connected person in the universe. Well, one of them. He has the biggest Rolodex I've ever come across. Whenever I want to know somebody, I want to speak to Jeff or whoever, I'll go, Tim, do you happen to have Jeff's email? And he goes, oh, yes, he's been on my show in the past. And Tim's real interest right now, as well as lots of other things, because he's an all-round fantastic chap, is alternative propulsion and gravity research. And Tim doesn't just research on the web. Tim actually goes out and meets the people and who are actually doing the experiments. And very much he's put me in touch with people like Falcon Space and lots of others. I'm about to publish a film on Green Glow, which was the BAE gravity research with Ron Evans and others. So fantastic. But the key player in all of this, bringing all this together and making it public on social media, is Tim Ventura. So I would be remiss not to talk to Tim about alternative propulsion and gravity. And so, Tim, you run something called APEC. Tell the viewers what APEC is.
Yeah. Simon, well, let me start by thanking you for having me on your channel. It is truly an honor to be here with you today. And, they say when it comes to Rolodexes, size doesn't matter. So,
quality.
Just put that out there. Yeah. I do. I run the Alternative Propulsion Engineering Conference, and our website is at altpropulsion.com. And actually, one of the things that I am really excited about is we have had a couple of long-term projects with regular presenters, and they are finally coming to fruition. And I played kind of a minor role in both of those. One, as you mentioned, Mark Sokol in the dynamic nuclear polarization. I have been to conferences with him. I've been to his lab in New Jersey. I have helped in a very minor way, doing some filming and cinematography there to try and help convey his message. The other person is Jared Yates. Yeah. Jared has been doing a knockdown, drag out on several UFO samples.
Ah,
He has analyzed two different samples of Art's parts, as well as the Frank Kimbler bounce site sample
ooh,
and the let me see, St. Augustine wreckage samples.
yeah.
And then we have some unique paperwork on the Danagorsk crash wreckage. And so for all of this, we have this
Oh,
tremendous amount of data. And the really amazing thing is, for everything except the Russian crash site, this is
yeah.
our own data. Like Jared has literally worked with specialists all over the country doing scanning electron microscope as well as X-ray fluorescence
Mm,
and several other types of analysis. He's been working with Matthew Sadaugas from the
right.
University at Albany and the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. They did nuclear breakdown analysis on it. So
Yeah, we
absolutely
can
amazing.
immediately prove, is it terrestrial or extraterrestrial? And also, excitingly, Mark's been looking at some of the samples under his experimental equipment. It's
Now,
great.
if it's okay, do you think I could put in a plug for the upcoming Alt Propulsion Conference?
Well, yeah.
I would love.
Not only can you must because, and I think viewers, you really, if you are interested or involved in this field, you get involved with APEC. I mean, yeah. So please, there's an upcoming conference. Tell us about it, Tim.
Okay, well, let me actually, if it's okay. Oops, let me see. Screen sharing is not turned on. Um,
I'll allow it.
there we
You're
go. Okay,
you're more
yeah.
than welcome.
So this, for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, this is the Alt Propulsion Conference. This isn't the homepage. This is the March 15th upcoming one.
Okay,
We
couple of
have
days.
Matty Pitkanen, who's been doing gravity research for a very long time. He's kicking things off. Brian St. Clair is working on an inertial propulsion drive, and he does some really amazing work. And then Jared Yates is
Yeah,
going to be presenting on Art's Parts, and Matthew Sadaugas is as well. And
right.
so that is coming up here. I
And
would
I have
love
to
to
say
give.
to viewers, this isn't in a Las Vegas hotel room. This is international.
No,
This
it's
is
all online.
global. It's all online, so don't feel like you have to travel somewhere to a conference. This is an online conference, right?
Yeah. Now, if I could ask them, if people are open to it, we have a private announcement list. We don't spam, but I would love to ask people to sign up for that. Again, if
Yeah.
you go to altpropulsion.com, you can sign up for that list. And essentially, we send out like four emails a month. Two of them are reminders on the Wednesday before, two of them are reminders on Saturday. We always do our events on Saturdays. And then we have what's called an open mic, which is just kind of an open get together where people
Right.
talk and exchange information. It's working groups.
Yeah.
And then we have webinars once a month. And my job is basically just herding cats. These are the
Yeah.
geniuses. I just, I just herd cats. So
Oh
that's
yeah. So I'm a member, and everybody should, if you're interested in this field, and it is we we live in the most interesting times. Well done for being alive in 2025, because we live in a time where suddenly we're redefining how gravity works. We are proving that we're not alone in the universe, and there's a lot of things going on in the science community right now. And if you're interested in science and what's going on in the world and how humanity is going to change in the next coming decades, yeah, be part of it because you are living in that time right now. Would you agree,
absolutely.
Tim? Do you think we that I mean, I'm not saying it's going to. I mean, I think CNN and the media expect it to happen next week, but I think we. I really think that we're living like the equivalent of living in 1900 and in 1915.
Yeah.
Einstein published general relativity. I think we're at that cusp of a whole lot of stuff coming together. What do you think?
Absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
I have my own YouTube interview channel, which you have been on, and in fact, I should
Sure.
mention this. So your appearance, I always get the most amazing feedback. People absolutely love Professor Simon. They're like,
Right.
"That's wonderful to see him on your channel. Have him on again."
Yeah,
So
putting people together. I feel the same when you're on my channel and other people. It's a great thing. Another aspect of social media science, as I call it, or social media, which is now the science broadcaster of the world. It's really fun for viewers to have people that are disparate. We watch Tim's channel, we watch mine, we watch whoever's, Ashton's or Pavel's channel, and then it's great when we can actually come together and share information. So yeah, no, it's good for the viewers and it's good for us because it's a small community and we are all connected.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so the interesting thing that I've been seeing, I cover a lot of AI, and
Oh
what
yeah.
I'm seeing is scientists are starting to use AI not only to solve formulas. Dr. Jack Sarfati has sent several out where AI has solved formulas in 3 minutes that would take a physicist months potentially to do, but also for research, it will just dig through everything and bring up papers and ideas, and it can synthesize different ideas together. And so, in terms of areas like gravity research and propulsion and energy generation, things like that, I mean, I even know someone who is using ChatGPT for personal therapy, and she
Yeah.
read some of what it said to her, and I was just blown away. It was
Ah,
amazing.
but it was
So,
helpful to her.
yeah,
Oh, great. Yeah, sure.
incredibly, yeah.
Yeah, remember
It's
back in
so
the 1990s where you could talk to an AI type parrot and web, and it would say, "So, what do you think about that, Tim?"
yeah.
And that is well known as useful therapy, because it is talking therapy. Oh, it's great. Yeah, well, it's amazing that you mentioned Jet Safati. So, I am just waking up here in France, and you are about to go to bed, and we both just opened. We're both on this Jet Safati email list, and yeah, suddenly, as you say, Jack and other physicists can now troll whatever the word is, look for data that AI large word models can pull together, and it can come up with things that would take you, a mere mortal, a long time. So yeah, I've just literally been having my croissant and my coffee, reading Jack Sarfati's emails about how that works, and that's very interesting. So yeah, that's yet
Well,
another aspect of the interesting times we live in.
and so you and I are connected on Facebook also. I see inside your personal world. I see there
Oh,
was a goat. I've
the
seen I've seen
goats.
the
Yeah,
croissant and
right.
the coffee, you know. So
Sure.
I've seen your wonderful house. It's amazing. It is amazing.
Well, you're very welcome to come. But yeah. No, yeah, we live in interesting times. So talking to the Green Glow people. So Green Glow was a project run by uh, BAE, who are a large defense corporation in the United Kingdom, and they obviously their bosses were very interested in. Is it possible to modify or gravity in one way or another? And they hired these people to do it. So so there must be an interest in that, but from defense contractors and also for the science community. Um, do you think we're now on the cusp post Green Glow and what they found and what other people are working on in being able to understand a better way of how gravity works? I've
We are
heard,
getting
yeah,
Yeah. And in fact, we were talking about Jack Sarfati a moment ago. So Jack
yeah,
Sarfati, a few
yeah,
years back, started talking about what's called gravitational metamaterials.
right,
And I think the general idea is that gravity is the weakest force by far, right? And so if you want to directly modify that, you have to find ways to amplify that interaction. And he did very detailed, rigorous relativistic physics. So that's top-down physics that
yeah,
said, yes, if you find gravitational metamaterials that can basically change the refractive index of gravity, then you can create this UFO warp drive. That was his idea. So this takes us back to Art's parts because Jared Yates doing the scanning electron micrograph stuff,
Yeah.
he is seeing structures that look like nanostructures. He's seeing things that look
Right.
like nano gold wires, as well as micro layering junctions at micro layers.
Yeah.
And so, in
And
fact,
an
if you're
interesting
open
choice
to
of
it,
materials as well, because we were beginning to get that there are unique metals with unique materials as well
yeah,
that can be
yeah.
alloyed or layered. Yeah.
And I am happy if you're open to it. Let me do a very quick share. This
Wow.
is just this is just a tiny amount of basically the work that was done. This is Falcon Space. I was able to bring this up in a hurry. They put this on a scanning electron microscope. This
Wow.
is the original arts parts sample that we started working with last year.
That's the stuff.
And this is just a tiny fraction of the work that was done.
Look at
And so
that. Yeah.
I have this is a part of my Flickr galleries, and I'm happy
Yeah.
to provide you with a link if anyone wants this.
So
Um,
who is this woman? Who is this? What's her?
this this was a third party company. In terms of SEM, we have actually had, I
Yeah.
think, 4 or 5 different companies
Look at that.
involved with it.
Oh,
And
amazing.
so
We're
these are
seeing the
just some of the
parts.
photos.
Yeah. I've never
Oh
seen these,
yeah,
Tim. These are fascinating. Look at that.
yeah.
What is it? Oh, yeah, it's
Well,
interesting stuff.
yeah, this is the bismuth magnesium microlayer, right?
Right.
And
Right.
there's a lot going on here. And so again,
Yeah.
this Saturday, Jared Yates is going to drill down. The other part that I can't stress enough is so that the photos that I have of this
Yeah.
are I mean, again, I'm showing you a ton of them. He has hundreds and hundreds of photos, as well as X-ray fluorescence
Right.
and what's called neutron activation analysis.
Yeah. Good ways
Again,
to.
I'm happy to drop a link. I'll drop a link to my link tree in there so that people can look. But
People would love to
um,
see this. I think maybe we should, for people who don't quite understand metamaterials, define what a metamaterial is. It's not a material that necessarily, well, it actually does something because of its form and structure. A good
yeah,
metamaterial would be a coating for a stealth aircraft. So if you could coat
yeah,
an aircraft with a material, and it doesn't absorb microwave radar energy. It doesn't absorb it. Energy isn't created or destroyed. Keep that one in mind. It refracts it. It reflects it. It disrupts it in counterintuitive ways. So it's not reflected back. And that interaction at different EM frequencies, or even gravitational frequencies, if that's what it is amazing. We now have metamaterials that work in optical wavelengths. I mean,
yeah.
yeah. Thanks to Imperial College London, and that's something that Hal Puthoff and his company have been working on that as purely as a camouflage. I mean, imagine if you had a tank covered in a metamaterial that didn't reflect visible light. Well, between you,
Well,
that
and
exists. Yeah.
so again, you mentioned Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff did testing of Art's parts
Oh,
in
good.
2012,
Right.
and Dr. Jim Segala helped him with that, as well as some
Right.
other people. The indication that I have was that when they applied a terahertz frequency to that, if I remember
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
it took off, it flew. And so there is this idea, terahertz is a very difficult band to get to because semiconductor packaging tends to
Right.
reabsorb it,
That's
but
right.
it can be done. And there are several reasons why that frequency range would be preferable. And so he had that indication.
Yeah.
And then Travis Taylor,
Yeah.
right, from Skinwalker Ranch,
Uh,
Travis worked on Linda Moulton Howe's sample back in the
same
1990s.
source. Right. Right.
Yeah, and he had levitation as well back in the day. So
Oh,
there's a lot going on
yeah.
here. And
Again,
again,
I think
our
viewers need to know terahertz. It sounds, it has the word terror, but it's TERRA. It's a frequency that's above what we call the microwave spectrum. So it's a bridging frequency which is higher than say centimeters. It's less than centimeters. It's in the millimeter wave band. Says me. maybe, and it's the intermediate frequency between, this is wrong, but this is a good way of looking at it, between microwaves and visible light. So it's an incredibly interesting band, and it's very, very hard to produce. So when,
Yeah.
if that is producible, it might have interesting. It obviously does have interesting effects. No, that was my science 101 on what terahertz is, because I didn't know. Is that roughly right?
Oh yeah, yeah, and there is so much to this story. And again,
Yeah.
in my opinion, this is the biggest UFO story of 2025. And the thing for me that's so
Yes.
exciting about it is that it is based entirely on hard work, perseverance, and true science.
And
And
experimentation.
that's
It's just not people's opinion and speculative thought.
yeah.
They're actually testing this stuff.
There are a lot of other story, and I'm sure that we will see more in the UFO headlines, right? There's a lot going on, and I know that you were following about some stories also. Rendlesham, I guess, is coming back into the headlines. You mentioned that
Should
the
it
other day.
should. What happened there is so important to understand, and it's not what you think.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. This one, though, I think, at least so far, this one it's building on itself, and it's somewhat predictable. We're seeing lots of new and exciting things come out of it, but
Yeah.
it's not like a big claim from nowhere. It's
No.
very much based in hard
Yeah.
work, and for me, that's really exciting.
And Gerard and Mark and other, Travis and Hal's have got results. There's actually an effect from this unique samples, which apparently come from which we can say probably are extraterrestrial. I've been working with Beatrice Villarreal. I'm very excited to say that. So Beatrice has started an EU only purely because of legal matters, but it's global.
Yeah,
UAP UFOs have to be global. They have to be seen all over this earth. And what she started is that there are many cold and maybe some hot cases of crash sites in Europe. So she's putting together.
oh,
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're going to crash in Sweden, and they're going to crash, in my village in France, maybe, as well as crashing in the United States, because there's an awful lot of the UFO community kind of think that UFOs only occur in the US. Well, of course, they have to be throughout the whole of the earth, don't they? Because they're coming. But so anyway, what Beatrice has started with this program is to get everybody in Europe sharing legends and myths, which might be an ancient folk memory of something that crashed. And she's investigating all the stories of crash sites from ancient records, ancient crash sites. Maybe a new one would occur, but she's hoping it would. But and she's going around sample collecting. And I've already found the most amazing source of samples. So in ancient Europe that often modern human religions, Christianity in Europe specifically, built churches on top of ancient pre-Christian sites,
yeah,
sites of special interest, hillsides, crash sites, whatever they are, and often, to kind of absorb whatever the pre-Christian, or we want to call it pagan, beliefs were about that special place. And often in European and in specifically in Russian churches, they have something called icons or bits of special relevance that come from
mhm,
the pre-site. So just looking around the French Department of Relics, that's the word, sorry, relics, they have a log of every relic that is held in Christian churches. They're often encased in glass, they're built into the altar, there might be in a dusty drawer. And some of them, Tim, are metal from an ancient that
okay.
they dug up before they built the church, and they're thousands, hundreds of
You know,
thousands of years old. What are they?
that makes me wonder. Actually, it brings two things to mind.
Yeah,
Beatrice is absolutely wonderful.
yeah,
I know she is going through over 100 years of astronomical photos. And
Oh,
again, this comes back to AI. When she's able to put that into AI,
yeah.
the mind boggles at what she'll be able to find. But the idea is brilliant. And then
Sure.
the other thing that is relatively new, it would
Yeah.
be wonderful to see someone use ground penetrating radar at these ancient sites. What
Oh,
would they
definitely.
find?
We need to dig them up. Yeah. And
Yeah,
also,
yeah.
all I'm doing is, and she agrees that it's a good approach, is that many of the sites, are where kind of legend turns into myth, and we need to turn that myth back into science. That's my kind of catchphrase on that. And we need to go and dig it up, or just ask the church. What's that piece of metal you've got in a case above the altar? Is it the finger of Christ, or is it a piece of the crashed UFO? It's a long shot, but I think it certainly that research is going on. And the other thing about Art's Parts, I would like to say, and you will know this fantastic story that Avi Loeb tells, is that if we don't, we might not necessarily understand it by looking at it, going,
Yes.
because he tells the story if you showed an iPhone to ancient humans, they would use their culture, their knowledge to look at it. And eventually, after not understanding anything about why an iPhone operates and how it's built, they would look at it and say, it's a shiny rock. And I think in some ways,
Well,
when we're looking at metamaterials from an ET or a future time, it's hard to assess because it's going to be so different and complex.
so the work that Jared has been doing in terms of these metamaterials
Yeah.
has led him towards the work of Clee Irwin. And Clee
Oh,
Irwin actually has a hyperdimensional model of it. And the idea is that if you look at strategically placed nanodots on the surface of material, which Jared thinks he may have found, if you
right,
look at those, they don't make sense in 3 dimensions. But if
right.
you visualize them as part of a higher dimensional field, then
Ah,
all of a sudden it could form a cube or a wall or whatever you need. And this comes out of Clee Irwin's work, which
right.
is also interesting because Clee is a contemporary of Jack Sarfati, and they agree on many things, including time travel. They are both time
Yeah,
travel advocates.
sure. Oh, interesting times. That's great. Isn't
Yeah.
that fantastic? So suddenly the structure of Art's Parts might appear completely impossible to understand, but by smart people, AI, and people assessing it, suddenly I think the key word in our caveman age is to think about metamaterials, to think about how materials affects um, uh, gravity.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that is absolutely fascinating, and I really wanted to ask Ron Evans from Greenglow about gravity research, was gravity. If we take the Einsteinian model of the two words joined together, space-time, mass, is the side effect of altering space-time by mass is gravity. But I think Ron Ron is very down on that now. He thinks that's an old model that needs to be updated, and I think that's interesting. But what I wanted to ask Ron, and he was great at answering, is gravity modification is also time modification. You can't F
Yes.
with
Yeah.
gravity without affecting space time. And so he said, absolutely. Making a flying car, making an airplane lighter than air, wasn't what their goal was. I mean, maybe a defense contractor would want that. But what they found was, in fact, if you mess with gravity, you mess both with, well, you also mess with time. And I think
Yeah.
that they're linked. You can't not separate them. Is that what people are finding? Are you getting that kind of
They
feel?
They are. And so Jack Sarfati doesn't believe that paradoxes are an issue, and that is because of the way that he looks at closed timeline curves.
Yeah.
I did an interview on, it was actually on quantum computing with a fellow named William Menezes, and he had said the prevailing wisdom is that if you run into a paradox, it's because of a shortcoming of the model and not the universe. And so he thinks that there's an alternative as well. So it is interesting. It's a very intriguing idea. And I don't claim to have any special knowledge, but it's I think the quest itself and the research leads to new discoveries.
Yeah.
Like with quantum computing,
Yeah.
just as an example, they have this idea that it may be many worlds theory, right? It may prove many worlds, right? And it's just like you said, so many big things are happening right now. It's really exciting, very exciting times.
Yeah, and I think it's all kind of coming together. We've had people. Yeah, I'm seeing connections with Stanford's research and distant viewing. I mean, remote viewing. I mean, suddenly what they were probably doing, and we know that it works, it was temporal. It wasn't geographic. They were doing remote viewing in time. And then we got Roger Penrose looking at microtubules and his colleague looking at how anesthetics work. It's all connected. It's all connected to a alternative physics where we don't have linear time. And when we understand that more and exploit it for good, I hope, for the good of mankind, I mean, fantastic. And I think we're right on that cusp.
Yeah, and the consciousness and the remote viewing aspect of things. I mean, I think everyone has. I think we have all had synchronicities
Oh,
and premonitions and strange things happen, right? That it's like there's something there and I don't understand it. And that's where I'm currently at. I don't claim to have any special wisdom, but it's kind of like UFOs. I don't understand all of it, but
no.
it's like where there's smoke, there's fire. So there's something going on.
Definitely, yeah. In that consciousness thing, absolutely, Tim, you're right. I mean, we have words that we use on a daily basis. Like, I have a gut feeling about the future. Okay,
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
Why? And it's not just adding up two and two. I had a great interview with Russell Targ, and Russell said that the best people to predict the future aren't Gypsy Rose Lee and a crystal ball in the fairground who want to actually tell you the answer that you paid her for, that you will meet a tall dark stranger or whatever. He said the best people who do remote viewing are investment bankers, because a little company comes into them and goes, I've made a new battery and it's fantastic. I would like to borrow $1 million from your bank and you'll make your money back and it'll be the best thing since sliced bread. And all they know is the people who present them and maybe a prototype battery, and they have to look into the future and say, will I make my money back and will I make a profit? And Russell says that they were one of the people in the industry who had the best tuned in remote viewing capabilities, isn't? Yeah, because they needed to do it. I think it's great.
Yeah, that's not surprising at all. It makes it's interesting. I'd never thought of that. He had talked about playing the silver market
He
too, if I
did.
remember
Yeah, he
right,
did.
way back when.
And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and his description, you can see this on various talks that he's given. He's described how he did it, and when I watch really carefully, because I've got this, I really want to understand how remote viewing works, because I'm really interested in consciousness and Roger Penrose and tubular microtubules and things, and quantum kind of timelessness, and when Russell Targ described how he actually did make a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the silver's futures market by predicting the future direction of silver price going up or down, he described how he did it. And when he tells you how he did it, suddenly you get to understand how remote viewing works. It seems like that us humans have an immense ability to remember a future emotional event. So
Mm.
a successful, happy ending in our future is remembered in the past by some people. I think we all do it, but some people are better than others. So Russell, what he did was he very much rewarded with positive outcome, with positive, you got it right, to his remote viewers when they got the stock market right. And in the future, and so he could ask their remote viewers in the week before, what do you think is going to happen in your future? And they had the ability to remember the positive outcome of their prediction. I mean, it sounds like bollocks is a word I use a lot, but it isn't. We do that all the time, and certain people are better at it. Uri Geller also says that you can't remember numbers, you can't predict written text. That's all
Yeah.
high-end processing. What you can feel in the future is an emotional event in your future, and he uses that emotional event to predict things. We need to understand that. It's great, fantastic.
It is. It's intriguing. And so speaking of emotional events right now, I am fighting with my social media. That's been my project for the last 2 weeks,
Yeah, I
is
see
fighting with
that.
social media. Yeah, well, and this is a little bit of an aside, but
No,
it
no.
is so interesting now that we have the new administration and we have Elon, right, who are
Yeah,
making all these changes. So
yeah.
LinkedIn has turned into a battleground. Twitter, for me at least, seems completely distracted. And
Yeah.
so I've been exploring different networks. The one
Okay.
that was intriguing was Blue Sky. The Blue Sky kind of
Okay.
alternative to Twitter. People seem to be boiling out of Twitter into that one. And
Okay.
then the other one, interestingly, is a lot of the UFO community is going to Instagram. That's kind of what I found so far.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're right. As we are social media science, we need to tap into that social trend. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
very
just
interesting. Yeah, good.
yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
think
That's what I've
YouTube
got. Yeah.
still has a very good ability to upload
Yes.
video, and it's it totally transformed the world advertising market. To be honest, that's its main thing it did. But yeah, no, to connect to people in ways that where they are. Oh, good research, Tim. Good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and YouTube seems like it is more of a universal base, I guess, right? And
Yeah.
it's not as susceptible to, it doesn't seem like it's as susceptible to fighting as some of these other platforms. And
Right.
so that maybe that's why. But yeah, it's interesting. This is going to be an interesting year. And yeah, and definitely the near future. I I mean, in terms of AI, also, there is so
Yeah.
much brewing there that
Yeah.
the DeepSeek just came out. They're talking about dropping the price of things like OpenAI by a factor of 10 or more.
Right.
And then you've got a new one called Manus, I think, out of
Right.
China, that's supposed to automate complex tasks, and supposedly it can run in the background when you're not there. So very interesting technologies coming out.
Oh, I think it's brilliant. I've seen a complete change in my. I'm old, and I tend to stick to old paradigm models of how I do things, and I now use a search engine like Google purely to find images and things that I kind of know that are already there. It's just a look. It's just a way of looking stuff up. I don't use it to search for information. I use a variation on ChatGPT to ask questions, and
Oh, okay.
and also in multi languages. So we live here in France, and French bureaucracy is a giant complex mess sometimes, and they are continually changing things. So I can ask in English language, tell me what French driver's licenses are changing their policy about insurance in 2025. Now, for me to find that in French from a French bureaucratic site would be almost impossible. Um, or I just have to speak to friends or something. But I can now type that query into an AI model, and it will look it up in the French bureaucratic system, translate it back into English, and give me the answer. I was like, this is what amazing tool we have. Yeah, it's very useful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
And
I trust it. It seems to
yeah,
be correct.
coming back to science, I mean, we
Yeah.
have tens or hundreds of thousands of papers that are related to these emerging and esoteric technologies in one way or another, right? And
Right.
right now, it's a process, it's largely a process of knowing the players by reputation and following the citations and looking carefully to see if they're citing correctly,
Yeah.
and so if you can get AI to do that, I mean, the world is your oyster, right? So.
Sure. I mean, you can do queries now like, read a paper, check references, and give me links to all the references. I mean, literally, that kind of thing that would have taken a team of researchers, a long time to actually pull up for you if you're a journalist or a scientist. No, no, it's really interesting. So, tell me a bit more about. A lot of people have been asking me about Falcon Space because I've been talking about them in passing, and you've had a lot of stuff with Falcon Space. How Ron Evans and Greenglow were wondering how they're funded, and because they were talking about institutional funding and private funding. How do Falcon Space pay for their research? Can you
I
talk about
think
that?
well, Mark owns he owns his own company, and so
Right.
I think a lot of it is I know a lot of it is kind of shoestring budget, pulling things
Ah,
together as he's able to,
right.
and so he just basically he is I would say he is beyond passionate and beyond motivated. I met Mark, I think in 2020. He approached me to start doing the APEC conference.
Oh.
And he said, "We want to do an anti-gravity conference, and it's going to be the best in the world, and you have to moderate it." And at the time, it scared me. I mean, I remember the first thing when he said that on the phone, I was like, "Oh, hell no." And I hung up on him. And then he called back. And I'm like, okay. And it was the pandemic.
Huge.
So I thought, you know what?
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, why
Yeah, no,
not? But
Apex, great. It's really taken off and it's good. And yeah, Mark, yeah, so Mark's very motivated. I mean, I think one of the things that we were talking about is a bit about big science and big science funding, and that seems to be a bit of a broken model right now from
it's
government funding.
dicey. I
Yeah,
just talked to
yeah,
Anna Estevez Brady, and she was over
right.
at the NSF. They had a big presentation. Falcon Space was one of their presenters, but they probably had, I think,
Yeah.
a dozen or more presenters back in November, December. And I believe she's going into the private sector now, but she said the NSF funding has changed a lot, even
Yeah.
in the last few months. So,
Right. I mean, Sabine Horsfeller, for her, though, what her name is,
mm,
German, is a fantastic woman and is very in touch with what's going on in the science community in Germany and Europe. And she's really ranting about how big science here in Europe just tends to perpetuate funding of existing projects. And there's very little money going into novel ideas. In fact, the whole science community don't like novel ideas, in her opinion. I mean, I think scientists are open-minded, really, but also, when it comes down to getting their project funded, they I don't think many of them take big risks. So a massive
yeah.
project like CERN will just build on what they've done and not go off at a tangent. And I think that's wrong. I think there needs to be funding for big science, which is established and keeps people employed and that science moving forward. But there needs to be funding for maverick science and stuff. And,
Oh, yeah,
and I don't
absolutely.
think that exists. I think that's really, yeah.
Well, and not just in, I mean, not just in like gravity research, but even in
No.
things like battery research. One of the things that intrigued me is
Yeah.
in terms of the lithium ion batteries, there are at least four or five alternatives that
Oh,
perform better and have more
sure.
power
Right.
that really aren't being developed because the money isn't there to fund them. And there's this gap where it's like, well, you know, Tesla would use this if it existed, but it doesn't exist, so they won't spend money to use it. And it's like, okay, guys, you got to think ahead a little bit. Like,
Mm.
you know, you could say the same thing about rocket technology, right? Like
Yeah.
the SpaceX Falcon is wonderful today. Okay, what about in 50 years? You don't want to be using the same thing 50 years
No.
from now.
No.
So, So
Yeah,
yeah.
all the gravity researchers I've spoken to really rant about. I mean, yeah, SpaceX has got a low-cost launch system, but we need to move away from liquid or usable propellants for humanity to escape into deep space. Really, we can't carry propellants with us. We need to tap into other methods of propulsion. I mean, or
Oh
we're
yeah.
gonna, we're going to be trapped on Earth. I can see why in the short, as you say, in the short term, SpaceX has done amazing work, but it's not a long-term future.
I mean, for me, I try and visualize things like overlapping paths of research, right? You have
Ah,
down here on the bottom, you have rockets, and the rockets are improving in so many ways, right? In
oh,
terms of payloads and thrust and control. I mean, you look at like, Elon Musk is landing them on the
landing,
launch pad now. It's amazing.
which is good.
But so you have that down at the baseline, and then above that, and it's staggered, then you've got your nuclear propulsion, right?
Mhm.
And there are a lot of things that you can use that for, but it has issues like cooling systems. That's a major issue. And
Uh,
so it's a little bit further out. And then I think that we need to get started on this today, but it's staggered even further is field effect propulsion, gravity propulsion, right? And
yeah,
that's what things like that are what Charlie Bueller, the
yeah.
NASA electrostatic specialist, and Andrew Rigma at Exodus are working with. So
Another
we already have
fascinating
kind of the
chap,
hints.
Bueller, fantastic. What great, yeah. And I mean, again, he's actually an experimentalist. I mean, it's based on theory, but he's actually shown effects with
Yeah.
more than 1G effects. Oh, it's
Well,
absolutely fantastic.
and again, in the case of Drew, right, Andrew Rigma, in case of Drew and Charlie, Drew has built and tested thousands and thousands of
Yeah,
prototypes.
that's
And
right.
so effectively, they have proven this B field Brown field effect propulsion, not ion wind, but true
Right.
reactionless field effect. And the part that I love about it was it wasn't any kind of a magic stroke of the pen that did it. It was hard work, perseverance, and very careful attention to detail over,
Yeah.
it's close to a decade now. So,
And
they
real,
just they
yeah, right, models, real physical models and experimentations and vacuum tanks and lots of data.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, build and test, build and test, build and
sure.
test, and they see the small effect. And
Yeah,
it's a mit when they, I mean, it is still a very small effect, but it was
yeah,
almost too small to measure when they first started. They've been
right.
able to improve it over a millionfold now, and it's
That's
still
right.
small. So,
It's still small. So I kind of remember working on TV programs about ion wind and lifters and things like that. It was big in my era when I was working in TV. And so is it that there was always a hint that it wasn't just an ionic Newtonian repulsion, obviously only working in atmosphere because it was affecting it was lift in our atmosphere. But what's bring me up to speed on this, Tim. What was there a secret magic bit of ionic propulsion which isn't just Newtonian reaction and non-reaction?
well,
I'm making that very complicated. You know,
excuse me. And
how does it work apart from just pushing ions out of a pin?
so I used to build what they called lifters back in the day, and it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
how I
yeah.
got into this area. And
Right.
and those were predominantly ion wind, but
Yeah.
we always felt at the time,
Ah,
and there were a number of tests that suggested this, right? You put it in sort of a sealed enclosure and spin it, and it would stop spinning, it would self-stabilize. So there were lots and lots of little tests that said to us, there's more here than just ion wind, right?
right, right.
And I think that this goes back to T.T. Brown. T.T. Brown
Yeah.
was working with devices. He knew what ion wind was. You had De
Yeah.
Seversky at the time, who had the flying bed spring back in the 50s. He knew what ion wind was.
Yeah.
They were all familiar with it. And Brown still said this is asymmetrical capacitance. This is a field effect propulsion. It is
Right.
not the same. But I
Different.
think the challenge has been the ion wind is so predominant at the higher voltages that it's been very, very difficult to test. Now, in Bueller's case with Exodus, one of the brilliant things they've done is drop the voltage down. They're only working at a few thousand volts, so you don't have the ion wind to begin with, and they're able to measure the remaining force.
And they're doing it in vacuum as well, so there's no.
Oh yes, hard vacuum. Yeah. And
Right.
again,
I know. I've
Drew has
seen his
become a
vacuum.
master. Yeah, he is a master of vacuum chambers. He has
Yeah.
incredible knowledge and training there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's exciting.
Don't do
It
it
is
at
exciting.
home. He Drew's hilarious. He said, "Yeah, that's right. It's not going to work with a vacuum cleaner in a bucket." No, yeah, it seems quite difficult.
Yeah,
No, it's
it's
fantastic.
tricky. It's tricky. It takes a long, I visited Drew's lab last year and he
Yeah.
walked me through it, and
Right.
it is tricky. I mean, the vacuum chambers, it's one of those things that seems linear until you start to learn about how they work and what can go wrong and where it can leak and stuff like if you use the wrong oil in the pump, then the oil will
Mm.
sublimate and you get oil vapor, right? So
No.
just lots and lots of little stuff that can cause trouble.
Tim, you're really at the cutting edge of this. It's good, and yeah, we live in interesting times. I'm also hearing um, a lot more about proof that we're probably not alone in the universe. There's certainly now been spectral analysis of exoplanet atmospheres, which is finding interesting results. I mean, and Brett Listen and SETI carry on with new tools to look at technological signatures, but in very, very interesting ways. A technological signature doesn't have to be an alien version of the I Love Lucy show. It's just a signature of something which isn't a natural process. It might be one of the things that they're looking for is illumination, a reflection.
Mm,
Imagine an exoplanet that had structures which were shiny. It's very unlikely that a large
yeah.
and the pattern of the shininess would indicate an intelligent design. Loads of things are going on in that field. And the other thing that we have again in this amazing year of 2025, and I think this decade that we're living in, is that we now, using AI, no longer have spheres on on our planet. You don't have you don't need to have the separation of a radio telescope in Australia and one in England. They're both interconnected. You know, they share their data. We now have global networking of radio telescopes, and the radio telescope science field are really have always been very good at sharing, because when they see something in the night sky, they need to get their mate in Hawaii and their mate in Namibia to look at it. You know, and that and they're very good at doing that. So, and now all that data is shared and is being processed in novel ways to look for patterns. Um, I'm I'm slightly disappointed that SETI has gone a bit dark. And Breakthrough Listen, with Yuri Milner's funding, isn't actually publishing, as far as I know, very many new results. I worry that there's
Okay.
a bit of keeping quiet going on. Have you heard anything about
I
that?
haven't. I haven't. The one that I've been kind of focused on is,
Right,
we're coming up in the next 2 years good to space telescopes. The Nancy Roman Grace Space Telescope is going to be up by 2027.
right.
And that they're going to use that to spot what they believe are the best potential worlds. And then they have something called Habitable Worlds Observatory
That's
expected to
right.
launch in the 2040s.
That's right.
And so I am so excited about that. Even if we don't see alien spaceships or little
No,
green men, it's still very likely that we'll start to see planets with biospheres, with life, right? For me, that is so exciting. And I think that the
yeah.
psychological change of knowing there's
Yes.
life out there in the universe will open people up to things like the UAP phenomena and saying, wait a minute, maybe it is visiting us. We know it's there now,
Right.
right? It's not just something we suspect.
No. I think, yeah, it would be a sea change. It would be amazing for humanity to actually have that confirmation. And I think it's a very, I think there was a fear that it would be unsettling and terrifying, and I think not. I think it's an incredibly positive thing. It's a big step for humanity to realize that we're not alone in the universe. It's just the best thing ever. I really hope in our lifetime that that can be published and what they're finding at present. My inside gossip on what people are telling me is there's lots of things we found, Simon, but we're not ready to publish it yet. I mean, that's what. Certainly, SETI did a consultation about publishing when they find something which is pretty good evidence or confirmation, put it like that. And they were advised, I have heard, not to necessarily come out with it straight away, because as soon as we tell people we think we found life on another planet, they'll want to know what do they look like, what are they saying, and things like that. Whereas, I mean, Tim, we live on a planet here, Earth, with only one organic creature, humans, really, that make the I Love Lucy show. I mean, I live in a farm. I have incredibly intelligent goats and sheep and rescue dogs and cats and birds, and they are very happy living on a planet where they have they're safe and they have enough to eat. They're not technological. So there's going to be life from microbial level to Mr. Blobby out there, I'm sure.
Well, and going back to Contact, right? The movie that was inspired by the
Oh,
Carl Sagan book,
interesting.
they had talked about life reaches out,
Right.
that, it's part of natural curiosity. It's part of the learning process, and it's
Sure.
driven by not wanting to be alone in the universe. And I think those are beautiful motives for us to reach out as well as for life out there to reach out to us. So
Yeah,
that's for me, that's it's all wonderful.
I think it's great. I mean, Avi Loeb talks about walking down your street and meeting your neighbors, and it's exactly right. I mean, we can't live in an isolated little house. We know we live in a street, and we can now see the other houses. All we have to do is go and knock on their door, or listen, and actually look through the window and see what they're watching. No, I'm joking, but I mean that's how Avi talks about it, and it's absolutely true. Oh, Tim, thank you so much for your connectivity, your
Oh, absolutely. Well,
inquiring
thank you.
mind, and your Rolodex. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And hopefully, your channel and other channels can bring these people to others, to an audience. I mean, you are
Well,
putting people
yeah,
on
and
that most people would never hear from.
well, thank you. And I want to have you back on as well. Again,
Sure,
your audience,
sure.
I am speaking as a third party. When
Yeah,
you're on my channel, your audience writes in and says, "We love Simon. Have Simon on more." So
yeah,
you connect with people and you educate people, and you have a
yeah.
massive library of amazing educational materials. So thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, no, yeah, no. As you say, I mean, we are vectors to bring this story to a general public. And you're right. I mean, the audience is everything, really. I mean, the questions that they ask, it's really interesting. I read the responses, comment sections on YouTube, and yeah, a lot of people need basic science education, which are hopefully
Yeah.
we can fill them into the basics so they understand how amazing science is and the amazing time that we live in. And then other people, wow, every day I wake up and get a long comment or a personal email because they've dug me out of my email address and they send me things. I'm going, oh, that's amazing, and really interesting ideas and theories and things that people are working on. Yeah, no, it's great. So I think we should continue to connect people to breaking science, Tim. I think it's a good quest that we're on. So thank you.
Well, Simon, thank you yet again, sir. Thank you yet again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. So so the APEC conference again on the 15th of March is coming up. join it online virtually from anywhere in the world, and that will be great. You've got some real keynote speakers on that, and then in your short term or if you want to reveal a longer term future, who are you talking to? Who are you what are you planning to do on your channel and bringing to the world?
So the only person that I have scheduled right now is a fellow named Tom Hastings, and I'm happy to forward him over to you if you'd like. He runs a website called UFOhackers.org,
Okay.
and so he is a cybersecurity professional. He's in the Seattle area near where I am,
Okay.
and he covers three different cases. One of those, as you and everyone knows, is Gary McKinnon, right, the world's most famous UFO hacker,
I know
and
Gary.
I know Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gary is wonderful. Gary is a wonderful person.
Fantastic guy. Yeah.
Um, and so he talks about Gary's case, but there are two others that happened before that. And
Uh,
then he also has some links in there to speakers on cybersecurity and things along those lines. So I'm going to be doing an interview with him, and I'm more than happy to forward him your way. And then I'm just kind of keeping my nose to the grindstone. But again, I'm getting distracted with social media stuff because it's chaotic right now. It's very chaotic.
Yeah, I don't know how you work, but I mean, I wake up in the morning and I open my iPad in bed with a coffee and a croissant, and I go, whoa, every day. I don't have to search for stories. They are out there. There's so much going on our planet right now in science and in the UFO research and in all kinds of science, actually. Yeah, I have to actually filter to what
Yeah.
story I actually cover because there's so many interesting stories out there. We live in interesting times. So thank you, Tim. And
Absolutely.
yeah, keep connected, and we are going to bring breakthroughs to our viewers.